Now, your organization, Grief to Growth. Let's talk about that a bit. How do you work with others who suffered tragedy like this to overcome it? Is there ever really an overcoming?
Yeah, that is a great question. When it comes to grief, I was just talking with a client earlier today, and she said something I thought was really beautiful. She said, I will live with my grief for the rest of my life. She said, my grief is no longer my enemy. My grief is actually my greatest friend. And so, do we overcome grief? Do we get over it? Do we move on past it? I don't think so. Grief is not a disease. It's not something to be healed from. It's not a disorder. It's a natural result of longing or loving someone who is no longer physically here. And it can actually be not just a person. It could be anything that we lose. So when people ask me, am I going to get over this or will I ever be the same person? Is another question I get from people. And I say, I hope you're not going to be the same person. I hope that you don't waste this pain because pain can transform us. Pain can actually lift us to another level. We can use it to inspire ourselves. We can use it to make ourselves stronger. It makes us realize how strong we are to begin with. So what I do with people when I work with them is I help them to reframe the event. We work on what might be blocking the healing or the growth, if you want to call it that. A lot of times it's guilt, so it's blaming other people, it's blaming ourselves, it's blaming our loved ones. So there could be anger or guilt, which I say is just anger turned inward. So we work on those things. Forgiveness, if we need to forgive anybody before we can start to heal, and then how do I reframe this? How do I find the silver lining? How do I not even find, how do I create the silver lining? How do I create from this? How do I take this and turn this into something that benefits me? And again, understanding that pre-birth planning is really helpful. I remember being at the first Helping Parents Heal conference 5 years ago, and someone asked the question, Suzanne Giesman was there, and she was channeling Sanaya. And someone asked Sanaya, why did we have to go through this? Why do we have to suffer this tragedy? Imagine 500 parents in a room who'd all suffered the same tragedy. And the answer from Sanaya, to paraphrase, was like, we don't see it as a tragedy from where we are. Your loved ones are still happy, healthy, and whole. Their lives did not end. They were not cut short. They just transitioned to a different form. They're still with you. They still love you. They still care about you. You will see them again. Now your journey, and this isn't what Sanaya said, but this is what I believe. Now our journey begins. Another journey begins for us. So we feel like our lives are over in a sense that that previous life is over. There's always going to be before Shayna passed and after Shayna passed. It's like AD and BC for me. I measure everything and like Shayna was here then, Shayna wasn't here then. So I'll never be that person I was before, but I can be an even better person.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. So when you are working with somebody, let's say it's somebody who's freshly bereaved, who hasn't done any kind of grief work, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes when you say things that, for those of us who aren't in that boat, it's easy to say, well, this was planned, or they're still there with you, et cetera. But if you say this to people who are freshly bereaved, sometimes they can just get downright furious with you. So
Sure.
when you're working with somebody who's newly bereaved, who's still feeling the confusion, the angst, et cetera, how do you begin the process? So if somebody who's watching this is in that situation, when they're coming to somebody like you, what can they expect? How do they prepare? Let's
Sure.
talk about that a bit.
Yeah, another great question. The thing is that you have to be very careful with these concepts because they can trigger really negative reactions. Guilt, for example, if I tell you that your daughter died so that you could grow, you might take that as, well, that's not fair. Why would I do that? Her life was cut short. So we have to approach those things very cautiously at the beginning. The other thing is, the first year or two of grief, in traditional grief counseling, they'll say in 6 months, you should kind of be over someone who's passed, and maybe if it was, someone really close, maybe a year. I say a year or 2 years is still early grief. You're still going to be in shock. There's going to be some numbness. So we have to cope on getting by on a day-to-day basis first before we can start talking about growing. First, we've got to just be able to maintain and to survive. But it's also in that very early grief, giving people a sense of hope that it's going to be okay, that it's not going to be like this forever. Because I remember that first 3 years, I thought, this is it. This is how it's going to be forever. I'm always going to be sad. I'm always going to be angry. I'm never going to feel joy again. That's a very common response that people have because as humans, we kind of do that. Whenever we're in a bad situation, we're like, this is it. This is always going to be this way. So one of the things, if you get around people like Helping Parents Heal, it really gives you hope. Sometimes you look at those people. I remember meeting Elizabeth Bosan. I'm like, okay, I can never be like her because she's just like, just kind of seems like she's really gotten over it, to use that phrase. But I do realize now, after being around so many people and being 8 years in myself, that you can start to feel joy again, and you can feel it without feeling guilt, and understanding that, again, our loved ones haven't lost anything, and we are here on a mission.
Yeah. Now, I have no idea if you can answer this question, but it's coming to mind. In
Mhm.
your experience, in your opinion, in your reality, why does it hurt so horribly on this side of the veil when they, from what we hear from people like Suzanne, et cetera, Suzanne Giesman, they're happy, healthy, filled with joy. They're in a beautiful place. It seems like these are two such extreme sensations. In your view,
Right. Yeah. It makes sense and I use analogies to help people come to grips with it. When our daughter, like my daughter went to college, my oldest daughter, I remember crying because she was going to be leaving the house for the first time and not living under my roof. But I didn't grieve her because I knew she was just 3 hours away. I knew I would see her again. I knew I could pick up the phone and call her. And even though I only saw her every few weeks or every few months, you don't grieve someone like that. When someone's on vacation, we don't grieve them because we know that they're not gone, they're in Italy. And I'm going to see them again, in a few weeks. So the reason why we grieve is because we don't truly believe that we're going to see them again. We don't truly believe that they're happy, healthy, and whole. We don't really understand that. We haven't taken that to heart, even though we might know that in our head. So once we have that, if we can use the analogy, like my daughter didn't die, she's just kind of off on vacation, or she's in college, or whatever you want to use, then it makes it easier to say, okay, I'm going to see her again. I don't need to grieve so heavily. From the other side, they have that perspective. They know, I mean, we might believe, they know that they're going to see us again. Time is different for them as well. So it doesn't seem like, as long as we feel like, once we think, oh, I'm only 50, I have to do this for 40 years or whatever the number is we put on it. So on the other side, they just think, okay, well, I just saw you. I'll see you again, and it's going to be really soon. And meanwhile, I got things to do. You've got things to do. They do check in on us. They do still care about us. But just like a parent, when my daughter went to college, before that, I said goodnight to her every night, talked to her every night. But when she was in school, I didn't talk to her every night. She was doing her thing, and she had her life to live. So it's really getting that perspective that this life is not that long, and the older we get, the more we realize that time flies, and that we are going to see them again. So I think that's exactly why I believe that people do grieve so heavily. And when you can get that perspective, it takes the edge off. It doesn't take away all of it. There's still that feeling, I don't know how long it's going to be. There's still that time where, like, I just can't go one more day. I need to see you now. We still have those feelings every once in a while, but we can make that shift from that to, okay, what's their perspective? Oh, I will see you again. And by the way, I'm with you now. You can communicate with me right now. You can talk to me now. I talk to my daughter every day. I talk to Shayna literally every day. My other daughter, Kayla, I only talk to her every couple of weeks, but Shayna, every morning I get up, I look at her picture. I have this picture hanging outside my front door, my bedroom door. When I open the bedroom door, it's the first thing I see in the morning. I say good morning to her.
That's really sweet. Wow. Thank you for that. Well, so then, do you believe that there is a point to the suffering that we experience?
I do believe that there is. I think that we come to this earth in part to experience the separation, experience the loss. I was interviewing a guy for my podcast. I was actually reading in his book, and we always talk about, like, why do we come here? Is it for experiences? Is it for it to grow? And he said something I'd never heard before. He said, we want to feel that feeling of abandonment. And it kind of took me back. I'm like, what do you mean? But we want to know what it's like to be separate, because I believe on the other side, we're always so connected. We never have a need for anything. I think we're curious creatures. And we're like, what would it feel like to feel separate? And so I do think we come here for that. And death is the ultimate separation, at least from our limited perspective. And we have that feeling, and it really makes us appreciate, life. The fact that we know that life is fleeting, the fact that we know that it's short, the fact that we know that it's so fragile, really heightens our appreciation for the time that we do have here.
Okay. All right. So then let's go back to the healing from the grief, something that may or may not ever happen.
Mhm.
What are some of the ways that people block themselves? I know you were talking about feeling guilt or forgiveness.
Mhm.
Are those the most common?
For me, I see the most common is when we're placing blame, whether it's on ourselves, on our loved one who's passed, or whether it's on other people. I think that's the most common block. The other thing might be we equate the love with the pain, and we think if I let go of the pain, I'm letting go of the love. So we feel like, and I will never forget this, when Shayna first passed. I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard that Thomas Jefferson, and he's one of my ancestors. I heard that when his wife died, he's like, I'm never going to be the same again. And I thought, my way of honoring my daughter will be to say that I'm never going to be the same again. They're always going to say Brian was never the same. I thought that would be a great way to honor her. And I've seen people that hold on to that pain as a way of honoring their loved ones. So we have to learn that pain does not equal love. We do love them. We do have the pain because we love them, but we can let go of the pain without letting go of the love.
Yeah, I hear you. In my own experience, I've felt that by ever being happy again, it's sort of doing a dishonor to them, that by my happiness, I'm sort of negating the fact that they ever existed. Is that a common one as well?
It is. And it's interesting because you will find yourself having a moment of happiness, smiling or laughing, and quickly like stop, like I'm not supposed to be happy. Or I remember, because I cried every day, every single day for the first probably several years, couple of years at least. And when you have a time, it's like, well, I haven't cried recently. Does that mean I'm forgetting about them? Does that mean I don't love them? So you'll have this self-sabotaging thing stopping you from healing. And again, that's what's really important, to make that shift and say, they're still with me. They want me to have. They don't want me to suffer for the rest of my life. I know Shayna's having a good time, so why wouldn't I have a good time too? And there's all these little stories and analogies and things that come along. So the week before Shayna passed, a couple of days before, she and her mother were on a trip, a volleyball trip. Shayna played national level volleyball. She was at a tournament in Florida, and we live in Ohio. So she was like driving a golf cart around the resort. She was drinking these $5 smoothies every day because her mother was a pushover. She's ordering oysters for dinner. And her mother asked her, don't you feel guilty? Because Brian and Kayla are back home. Brian's working. We're here having fun. Shayna goes, I'm having a good time. I'm sure they're okay. I'll see them when I get home. And she passed like a few days after that. And I continue to think about that story, because I'm like, I can see Shayna right now going, I'm having a good time. She's driving golf carts. She's having smoothies. She's playing volleyball with her friends. I'll see him when he gets here. And so she doesn't want me to be sad. She doesn't want me to be miserable for the rest of our lives. So that's not a way of honoring our loved one. In fact, it's exactly the opposite.